Welcome back. In this session, we shift our focus to how SAP's enterprise architecture approach aligns with well-known EA standards and models. The world of enterprise architecture has a rich history with well-known frameworks like TOGAF, modeling languages like ArchiMate, and other frameworks such as Zachman and more. In earlier sessions or traditional EA courses, you may have learned about frameworks such as TOGAF or modeling languages like ArchiMate. Here, we will clarify how those industry standards fit into SAP's current methodology, essentially replacing or reframing them with SAP-supported frameworks and terminology without losing the value that those standards provide. For example, Nestlé's Globe initiative, launched in 2001, exemplified aligning a global EA program with recognized standards and SAP's methodology. Its objectives included establishing a fully documented, standardized business process architecture and unified master data across the enterprise. To achieve this, Nestlé employed a formal Globe roadmap methodology, blending SAP's ASAP framework with PwC's ascendant approach to guide the transformation. This rigorous method echoed the structured guidance of frameworks like TOGAF, much like SAP's own EA methodology, which is built on the TOGAF standard. Nestlé's architects also adopted standard modeling techniques, for example, business process model and notation (BPMN), using tools such as SAP Signavio to map out processes in a clear graphical format, ensuring a common, easy to understand representation of workflows across the organization. To set the stage, think of EA standards as a common language. Without them, every company or every architect might do things their own way, which makes it hard to share knowledge, hire skilled people, or even use off-the-shelf tools. By aligning with a standard like TOGAF or using a common modeling notation like ArchiMate, we ensure that our architecture work is understood beyond just our team. SAP recognized this, which is why one of the core principles of their framework is use industry standards. In fact, SAP leverages a variety of industry standards, not only TOGAF for methodology, but also BPMN for process modeling and APQC's process classification for industry standard processes. This principle saves us effort. We don't need to invent a new method from scratch, and gives credibility to our architecture. It's based on something tried and true that others also trust. Let us start with a quick review of TOGAF. TOGAF, which is the Open Group Architecture Framework, is one of the most widely adopted EA frameworks globally. It's been around since the mid-90s and is maintained by the Open Group Consortium. At its heart, TOGAF provides the Architecture Development Method, ADM, a step-by-step approach to develop and govern enterprise architectures. The ADM cycle includes phases like preliminary, getting the EA capability set up, architecture vision, business architecture, information systems architecture, covering data and application, technology architecture, opportunities and solutions, migration planning, implementation governance, and architecture change management. If this sounds familiar, it's because we essentially described these in SAP's framework in earlier session. Indeed, SAP's EA methodology is essentially a flavor of TOGAF. It uses the same logical phases and even terminology. SAP's documentation explicitly states it aligns with the TOGAF standard and is tailored to the SAP reference architecture. What does tailored mean in practice? It means SAP didn't throw TOGAF out the window. Why would they, given TOGAF's maturity and widespread use? Instead, they made it practical for SAP users. TOGAF by itself is generic. For example, it doesn't tell you how to model a supply chain process or what specific documents you need for an ERP implementation. SAP's framework takes TOGAF's skeleton and adds flesh, concrete artifacts, specific guidance for SAP environments, and integration with SAP's own reference models and tools. Think of TOGAF as a formal language. SAP speaks that language, but with a certain dialect that includes SAP-specific idioms. The alignment is close enough that if you know TOGAF, you can communicate with SAP's framework easily. For instance, a statement of architecture work in TOGAF is an artifact you'll also find in SAP's method. TOGAF's idea of an architecture repository is mirrored in SAP's use of tools like the EA repository with predefined meta model. A quick note on Zachman, since it's another famous name. The Zachman framework is a schema for classifying architectural artifacts. It's often depicted as a table matrix with rows and columns. It's less of a process and more of a taxonomy. Some companies use it to ensure they cover all architecture aspects. For example, rows like business concept, system logic, technology components, and columns like data, what, function, how, network, where, and so on. SAP's framework doesn't explicitly use Zachman, but it inherently covers similar breadth by ensuring all those domains and perspectives are addressed. If your organization likes the Zachman way of thinking, you can still map SAP's artifacts onto Zachman's categories. For instance, a business capability map might fill in some of the what, how at the business level in Zachman terms, while a technology diagram fills in the how, where at the physical level, and so on. The key is nothing in SAP's approach contradicts these established frameworks. They are complementary. Now let's talk about ArchiMate, a term we've mentioned a few times. ArchiMate is not a framework like TOGAF, but rather a modeling language for enterprise architecture. Think of it as analogous to UML, which software engineers use to model software design, but specifically made for architects to model enterprises. ArchiMate was developed by the Open Group as well, and it was designed to align with the TOGAF content framework. What that means is the elements you can draw in ArchiMate correspond to architecture concepts like business processes, applications, data objects, infrastructure services, and so on. And the relationships between them, flows, use, composition, and so on, align to what TOGAF expects in an architecture model. Essentially, ArchiMate gives you a standard diagramming notation to capture everything across the business, application, data, and technology layers in a unified way. A key principle of SAP's EA methodology is to use proven industry standards rather than reinventing the wheel. SAP's framework is not a rejection of standards like TOGAF. In fact, it's built as an adaptation of the Open Group Architecture Framework, TOGAF, and other best practices. SAP uses a variant of TOGAF version 10 ADM architecture development method as the backbone of its methodology. This means the familiar phases of TOGAF, such as defining an architecture vision, developing business information systems, technology architectures, and so on, are all present in SAP's approach. However, SAP has tailored TOGAF to its context, adding specific artifacts and tweaks. For example, in addition to standard TOGAF deliverables, SAP recommends creating a sustainable business model canvas to capture sustainability aspects of a business, or an application use case diagram to map applications to business use cases. These extensions address modern concerns and the specifics of SAP solution planning. When it comes to modeling notations, SAP encourages the use of industry standard languages where appropriate. A prime example is BPMN, Business Process Model and Notation for modeling business processes. SAP Signavio, the business process modeling tool we'll discuss, natively uses BPMN for process diagrams, which is an OMG standard widely understood in industry. Another standard integrated into SAP's approach is the APQC Process Classification Framework, PCF. SAP's reference business architecture uses APQC's taxonomy of processes and capabilities as a foundation, ensuring that the naming and grouping of processes align with a well-known industry model. This makes it easier for organizations to compare their processes against industry benchmarks or adopt best practices, since APQC PCF is essentially a library of common processes across industries. What about ArchiMate, the popular enterprise architecture modeling language? ArchiMate provides a rich set of symbols to describe architecture across business, application, and technology layers. In SAP's current EA tooling and methodology, ArchiMate diagrams are not explicitly front and center. Instead, SAP's meta model covers similar concepts. For example, business actors, functions, applications, data objects, technology components, but these are captured in tools like Linux in a repository-driven way rather than drawn free-form. Think of it this way. SAP's EA framework focuses on the content, the architectural entities, and their relationships more than on a specific diagramming notation. You can certainly represent SAP's architectures visually, and if needed, one could still use ArchiMate-style views. But SAP provides predefined templates and views aligned to its meta model. The emphasis is on maintaining a single source of truth in the EA repository with the elements like capability, process, application, data object, and so on, and then generating views or reports as needed. This approach ensures consistency and makes the architecture data more reusable, as opposed to manually maintaining a set of ArchiMate drawings that might become inconsistent. In summary, while ArchiMate and TOGAF remain valuable references, and experienced architects can absolutely apply that knowledge, SAP's framework absorbs and streamlines these standards into a more integrated practice for SAP environments. Let's explore the structure that SAP provides. The SAP EA meta model is essentially the formal definition of all the architectural object types and relationships we consider in an SAP-centric enterprise architecture. This meta model includes business layer entities like business capabilities, business processes, value streams or scenarios, and organizational units. It includes application layer entities like applications, systems, application interfaces, user roles, data entities, and technology layer entities like software components, databases, infrastructure, if relevant, and so on. All these are connected in meaningful ways. For example, business capabilities are realized by applications, processes are supported by applications, applications have data entities and rely on technology components, and so on. The SAP meta model ensures that when you input data into tools like Linux or Signavio, you're classifying information under these standard categories, which in turn allows for powerful analysis like impact of a change on business capabilities or which processes are affected if a certain application is down. One of the strongest advantages SAP provides is its reference architecture content that populates this meta model. This includes the SAP Reference Business Architecture, RBA, and SAP Reference Solution Architecture, RSA, which map real-world business domains and processes to SAP software solutions. In essence, the RBA outlines business capabilities and end-to-end processes common to many industries, while the RSA links those business elements to SAP applications and platform components. SAP's Intelligent Enterprise strategy is reflected here. The reference content illustrates how modern SAP solutions like S/4HANA, cloud services, and so on come together to enable end-to-end business scenarios. These curated models provide best practice templates so that enterprise architects don't have to start from a blank page. The reference content is organized across multiple views. For example, capability maps, process models, data models, and organizational maps to ensure both business and IT perspectives are covered in a structured way. By using the official reference architecture content, organizations can ensure their EA work is aligned with SAP's standards and take advantage of SAP's extensive industry experience embedded in these models. Now, let's discuss how they align with best practices. The RBA is essentially a standard business capability and process map. It outlines what a generic business in a given industry might do. SAP has compiled these reference business architectures for various industries like retail, manufacturing, utilities, and so on, each containing an organized hierarchy of business capabilities and end-to-end processes. This content is strongly informed by industry models such as APQC PCF and by SAP's decades of experience with business processes. On the other side, the RSA is a solution map. It lists the SAP solutions, applications, services, and shows how they fit together to enable the business capabilities in the RBA. SAP often publishes these as product maps or solution blueprints for different scenarios. For example, how S/4HANA, SAP SuccessFactors, and SAP Ariba might collectively support an end-to-end procure-to-pay process. The RSA can be seen as SAP's equivalent of reference architectures in TOGAF's enterprise continuum, but specific to SAP products. By using the RBA and RSA, architects ensure they are leveraging approved patterns. It also accelerates work. Rather than each project team inventing their own process flows or integration diagrams, they can start from SAP's reference models and then configure or extend as needed. Importantly, the reference architecture content in SAP's framework is kept consistent and current. SAP curates this content centrally with that internal EA working group and product teams so that it reflects the latest SAP product offerings and best practices. As a best practice, architects should use these references as a baseline and then document any deviations or extensions for their specific organization. The content is organized into 4 architecture views for clarity: capabilities, processes, data, and organization. Capabilities and processes capture the business view, while data and organization views ensure we map information and responsibility structures. By analyzing architecture through these lenses, we can make sure that, for example, our transformation covers not just new apps and processes, but also the data model and the people side, organizational units or roles involved. Throughout and beyond the Globe program, Nestlé leveraged SAP's reference models and a robust EA meta model to maintain a uniform architecture across its global enterprise. SAP's reference business architectures and solution models provided predefined best practices and integration templates, giving each business unit a common blueprint to follow. Nestlé also maintained a single source of truth for process standards, a central repository, the best practice library, containing over 1,000 documented best practices used worldwide. Furthermore, by modeling processes with a shared language like BPMN 2.0 via modern tools for centralized process modeling such as SAP Signavio, Nestlé ensured that architects in different regions could easily understand and reuse each other's designs. This disciplined use of reference content, standardized meta models, and BPMN-based modeling kept Nestlé's enterprise architecture consistent, structured, and interoperable across all business units. Throughout this session, we saw that SAP's enterprise architecture approach is not isolated. It's part of a broader EA ecosystem of standards. SAP aligns closely with TOGAF for methodology and embraces modeling standards like ArchiMate and BPMN, as well as industry reference models, APQC, and so on. This alignment benefits organizations by enabling clearer communication, leveraging existing best practices, and ensuring completeness in architectural planning. It also benefits you as an architect by grounding your work in a lingua franca of the profession. By adhering to these principles and best practices, organizations can make the most of SAP's EA framework. To summarize, SAP's approach aligns with global standards, so you're not off on an island, but it packages those standards into a practical SAP-tailored toolkit. It provides a meta model that covers what ArchiMate or TOGAF would, but in a more user-friendly way for SAP projects. It comes with reference content that acts as a ready-made starting point, which is a huge accelerator. And it emphasizes governance and continuous collaboration, which are the keys to keeping architecture relevant and valuable over time. As we wrap up this session of the bootcamp, take some time to ponder these final questions to reinforce your learning. How does your organization's current approach to enterprise architecture compare with these standard frameworks? If your company uses something like TOGAF or a homegrown framework, think about how SAP's alignment could allow you to plug in SAP-specific content without starting from scratch. Why do you think having a standard modeling language matters when communicating architectures to stakeholders? Consider a time when miscommunication or lack of a common representation caused issues in a project. Would using a standard notation have helped? This reflection can underscore the importance of consistency in documentation. What steps can you take to further familiarize yourself with EA standards? For instance, you might decide to pursue a SAP EA certification or TOGAF certification, or practice creating a simple architecture model in any tool. Continuous learning in these areas will strengthen your ability to apply SAP's EA framework effectively, as well as enhance your versatility as an enterprise architect. By engaging with these questions, you'll not only recall the concepts we've covered, but also envision how to apply them in your own work. Enterprise architecture is a journey of continuous improvement. Frameworks and standards are there as guiding lights, but your context and creativity fill in the details. With the foundational knowledge from these sessions, you're well on your way to designing architectures that drive successful, aligned, and future-ready enterprises. Keep learning, stay curious, and enjoy the rest of the bootcamp.